Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. Thank you so much for being here. So if you've been a longtime listener of this show, you have undoubtedly heard me interview nervous system expert Irene Lyon, probably more than once. She's been on this show a lot. Why? Because nervous system dysregulation is the root cause of so much dis-ease in the human body. And it's really hard to adopt behaviors that help you to improve your health if you have a nervous system that's working in hyperdrive because of an overabundance of stress and or traumas. Now, trauma can take a lot of forms. It could look like something major, like a car accident, abuse, or it might look like a lot of daily stressors packed on top of each other over the course of many years. Nervous system health is a very big deal because the nervous system affects every other system in the human body. And a sick nervous system is kind of like the rotting foundation of a house. You can spend a lot of time painting and cleaning the windows and clearing out the cobwebs, which is a lot of how Western medicine works, right? We address the symptoms, but nothing really fixed the foundation, the fundamental problems that those symptoms arise from, which is a sick nervous system. So all this to say, Irene is back because her 12-week Smart Body, Smart Mind program launches in just a few weeks. And if you're someone who is really struggling to make change in your life, despite your good intentions, if you feel like you're someone who's doing all the right things to improve your health in terms of lifestyle behaviors, but you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, or if you feel wildly disoriented and unfocused because of all that has happened over the past couple of years, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to do this work with Irene. And she only launches this program once a year. You know, for me personally and professionally, integration and embodiment are two skill sets that I am wildly passionate about when it comes to the health of a human. And Irene's work builds a foundation for that exploration in a way that nothing else I have been exposed to has. So in this episode, we talk about my experience with Irene's work, the amazing ability humans have to change at any age and stage of life, and the unorthodox path to healing a human. So Irene, welcome back again to the Great Podcast.
Yay.
You know, for people who may be listening who are newer to the podcast, I want to tell them that, number one, I've had you on the show. I think this is our fourth interview on the Grace and Grit podcast.
Yeah.
And the reason I have had you back so many times is because your work, I just feel like it resonates so well with the work that I teach my clients. And it really is such a gateway for so many people. Your work is into my work because I'm in the work of self-leadership, specifically in the health arena, teaching women how to show up for themselves more consistently. And that's really hard work to do if you have a really jacked nervous system.
You betcha.
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, you have so much great information on this topic. You have so many incredible courses on this topic, all of which I've been through. And you are in this process right now of launching your big program for the year, which is Smart Body, Smart Mind. And I am, full disclosure, I am an affiliate for this program. And I tell everybody that you're the only person I'm an affiliate for.
Aw, thanks.
Because I'm such a big believer in the work. And I've had many, many students go through the 21-day program. I have a lot of people talking about finally signing up this year for this program, because you do start to do work on yourself and realize that you're maybe coming up against something that you can't identify.
You got it.
Like I have the information, and yet there's still this resistance or this lack of capacity, which you speak so beautifully of. And there's a few things that I really just want to speak to is that, number one, I think your work really helps people to dive into awareness in a different way. It's not just sitting on a cushion and meditating. And I'm not judging that. I'm just saying it's one pathway. And you offer a lot of different pathways. And you also always explain that everyone's healing process is so different, which to me speaks really powerfully to self-leadership, because it's just so true. Everyone's path to health is so radically different. And so we have to learn skill sets that allow us to listen to ourselves better and understand ourselves better. And I think at the most foundational level, that really begins with the nervous system. Because if we can't respond to life and we're always reacting to life, nothing's going to change.
100%.
And the one other thing I want to say before I ask you some questions here is that I think my journey through the health space and just being a professional in the health space, I see a lot of conversations that are very isolated around health. We talk about mental health, we talk about physical health, or we talk about like muscle conditioning or whatever the thing is, gut health. And yet what I'm such a believer of, and I know you are because your work speaks so incredibly to this, is the process of integration. That human wholeness is integration. And so the paths we are taking to heal ourselves need to bring all of those elements together. And I really think you do such a great job of that. There was an analogy I read the other day that I wanted to share with you. Because I think when we think of like a lot of people in health, they often think of like the outside of the body, right? Somebody appearing healthy, they have muscle tone, they look like an athlete, whatever the case may be. And the analogy that I came across was that, focusing on health from the outside is a lot like mowing your lawn when your house is on fire. And that's how I feel about like this nervous system work.
That's so funny. Yeah, so true.
So it is. And, and I know we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but as a mover, so, I kind of thought I knew this whole mind-body connection thing. Like I thought I had mind-body connection. I thought I had body awareness.
Yeah.
And what I came to understand is understanding physiology is not the same as being in the body and experiencing the body. And that's really where your work has helped me so much,
Yeah.
in bridging that gap. So can we talk a little bit about the fact that I think a lot of people are trying to improve health by dictating to their body, right? Like telling their body what to do versus opening the channel of communication and starting to listen.
Yeah.
That feels terrifying. And I feel like that is what your work does. It allows us to open that channel of communication.
And what you said, that analogy is perfect because many people, and I generalize in my conversation right here, many people do have a burning house in their bodies and they know it. I think deep down, people kind of know it. They especially know it if they've tried what quote unquote everything and they're still struggling with whatever it might be. But even though they know there's something burning, that burning fire, they choose to mow the lawn.
Totally. Well, it's so much easier.
It's much easier. I actually loved mowing the lawn when I was a kid. That was like my weekend chore. I kind of liked it.
You talk to my son because he does not feel that.
Is it like a good old pull? Like there's
yeah, it's a push mower. It is.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Anyway, I mean, but it makes sense because, and this is where, I was just having a conversation with another one of your peers who is also helping promote the work. And I said, and she's same thing, yogi, teacher just thought she was embodied and then realized, holy hell, I'm not at all. I'm actually living in survival stress. It can be a very big slap on the face or wrist when especially we are professionals.
Yeah.
And then we're like, I have no idea how to connect to myself. What the heck have I been doing for the last 25 years or 10 years or 50 years? But what we have to understand is that we didn't really understand this information even 10 years ago, the nervous system, how all these things work, and that it isn't enough to just sit and meditate. And it's not just enough to go to therapy and talk out the problems. It's not enough to journal. It's not enough to cry uncontrollably. Like those can be helpful. But what is really starting to be understood, and you know this, and of course our students know this, is the unconscious element of the autonomic nervous system is a tricky beast, but it's also very intelligent because it keeps us safe. And if we had some kind of early stressor, abuse, adversity, but it doesn't have to be abuse from, say, parents. It could be, the example I used earlier today was maybe you had leukemia when you were young, or maybe you had a broken something when you came out of mom and you had to go through multiple surgeries and you had loving parents and all that, but you were put into terror when you were young and you survived. So everyone just kind of forgot about the fact that you were in like an INCU, ICU in surgeries when you were like under the age of 10 or teenager.
Like everyone moved on, but your body.
Yeah, it's like, and it's true. You're alive. Thank God you got through this. You can walk, you're functional. But then there is this part of the human system that remains in the trauma response, in what we would call the fight, flight, and in this case, it would be freeze. Because if we were in the response of activation and fight, flight, we wouldn't be able to function. And so in Western society, at least, there are a lot of functional freezers whom are very successful, very well put together, but they're sort of going through the motions and not really connected to their true human nature. And I would wage a guess to say that most of Western civilization, and again, I generalize, they're living in some form of survival stress, but they don't know it.
Yeah.
And that is hard to sometimes understand, when you think you've been doing everything right because you've been following you're like a saint with your food and your diet, your exercise, your routine, your spiritual practice, your relationships are amazing. And then it's like, and now why am I panicking whenever I get in my car? Or why can't I digest this food? Or I know I have to get this job done and it's sitting looking at me and I just can't.
Yeah.
This can all be related to stored survival stress within the physiology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think of like, the American standard diet, like we all know is not so great.
Yeah.
But I also think like the American standard of living, right? Like if we just look at like the way a large majority of people are living, there is so much daily trauma baked into that experience that we're expecting so much from ourselves all the time. We're not getting enough rest. We're not, managing our stressors in a way that is kind to our body and our brain. And so I think that modern day living has become a distressor for a lot of people.
It dysregulates us on top of potentially an existing dysregulation that was there from birth, or even in utero, or even in the family system. And it's tough because this classic 9 to 5 lifestyle, which really now is more like 7 to 9 p.m. at night, it's way more than 9 to 5. In a typical work week, there is not a lot of time to decompress. There's not a lot of time to pause and feel an emotion or sensation that has been activated due to XYZ. And then on top of that, many people, Courtney, don't even know that they're being triggered during their workday because they have to plow through the situation. And it's tough because it's not realistic for some people to just quit.
Yeah.
For like a job, for example, they have to make money, they have to put food on the table. And then I've also seen in our students and your peers some real significant shifts happen when they do start to recognize their physiology and what they are doing to themselves. Funny things start to happen that basically offer them up changes to their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. That when they are in that very stressful, and I'll just use that example for now, 9 to 5, 40-hour work week where there's virtually no time for any real self-care, when they start to do the work and they start to get into their nervous systems, it's as if the universe conspires to find them a different way of living and working and making money.
Well, and they're so much more open to seeing options.
Yes, that's exactly it. Because again, when you're stuck in a tunnel vision survival mode, you actually can't orient to possibility. Right. It's just not there because we have to survive. And so there's this interesting catch-22.
Yeah. So good. So you have a video series, this 3-part video series. It's totally free. I highly recommend every human listening to this podcast register for it. It's called Healing Trauma. It's 3 videos. Yep. But in that video series, and I think it's in the final video, that you start talking about sort of the pathway, the unorthodox pathway to healing. Mm-hmm. And I love this so much because, again, it just really speaks to each person's process being their own. But these tools that you teach in your work really can help everybody, right? Like everyone's going to turn to different tools at different times, but universally, they're probably going to help everybody on some level. So in that video, you also talk about these 5 keys of healing. Can we talk a little bit about those 5 keys? Because I think they're really good for people to know.
Yeah. And it's funny because I know what they are and they're also kind of all amalgamated together. But the one interesting thing about, I'm hoping one day this won't be unorthodox. It'll just be regular. This is how we heal.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
But a big part of those 5 keys is actually something that's on the outside of them. And if you download the videos and you see the worksheets, there's circles. So if you're not seeing me, I'm like drawing in the air circles. So there's the 5 keys in the middle that are all kind of connected like a Venn diagram. And then the outside is what kind of binds it. And that is, I call it the one important element, which is making sure that we sequence our neuroplastic healing. And what that means, so I'm going to go backwards, is that so often the practices, the techniques we're doing, while good, are too advanced for most systems.
100%.
And this can be, again, a very tough pill to swallow for someone who's very skilled and maybe teaches yoga or is a therapist. And they're like, what? I have to sit here and just feel my butt connecting to my chair? That's stupid. And then you get them to do it. And then you guide them to orient to the room. And then you pose the question, are you still feeling your butt on the chair? And at the beginning, most people can't hold that dual awareness. It is not baked into them, not because they're a bad person, but we're just not trained to hold these dimensions of awareness. But if someone, for instance, and again, I'm generalizing, has trouble just connecting with the world around them, we would call this orienting, which is one of the basic practices. That shows me, and they will learn that, okay, if you freak out when you let your eyes wander in the space, there's something going on there. There is something in your system that is terrified of the environment. Mm-hmm. The flip side, when you start to listen and feel the internal, if that's terrifying, okay, then that's a cue that something you have probably cut off, disconnected, not felt the internal, or there isn't skill to navigate and regulate with what's happening inside. And so this idea of sequencing the neuroplastic healing, and neuroplasticity is just a fancy word for the fact that we can change and grow and heal.
Yes.
You know, the key is we have to start with the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s.
Yep.
A child, a human can't read Shakespeare or create an essay until they know how to get the basics down. It's just like cooking a meal, right? You can't just know how to do a 5-course thing if you've never chopped carrots before. So you have to start with the basics. And so part of this blueprint and the 5 keys is honestly, Courtney, the overall arching thing is we're building capacity.
Yes.
And then, of course, well, what does capacity mean, Irene? I'm like, well, it can mean a lot of things depending on your history. But those examples I just gave, if it's really tough to connect with the external world, and I'll make a point here. Someone might connect with the external world because they're outside every day. They're driving their kids to school, they're walking the dog, they're engaging with people at work. So someone would say, well, they can connect with the external world. And yes, that's true. But when you drop them in to the detail and you ask them to slow down and feel their breath and feel the body, and then let your eyes really just softly take in the atmosphere, the world around you, the plant on your desk, the trees outside. And if there is this burgeoning of stress and this isn't safe, that is often a good indication. It's like a litmus test that lets us know, okay, there's something unresolved in this system.
Yeah.
And for the most part, that individual has been moving through life probably in some state of stress physiology. The biology is driving them, but they're not aware of it. And so building capacity is learning how to reconnect maybe with the external, or that example of the internal, via very, very sophisticated invitations, if you will, which is kind of what the course is all about. Smart body, smart mind, so that a person is learning their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And then they might be able to form a word or a sentence or a paragraph. And then before you know it, they're writing on their own. But you have to start with that basic capacity building stuff.
Yeah.
And so those 5 keys, like capacity is huge. And then the other is psychoeducation, basically just theory, right? Understanding the complexities of our physiology. Most of the time, if you go to a somatic therapist or even a therapist, they're not teaching you detail. They might give you a little, well, this is your stress, but very, very rarely is someone getting a full-on education. And so I kind of just give everything that I have learned in my trainings. I don't dumb it down. I try to make it more understandable with metaphor, analogy, simplifying things. But as you know, I'm not making up new words for parts of the nervous system. I'm teaching us, you guys, at least what the medical community has deemed this is this branch of this and that branch of this. So education is huge. And then another part of those keys would be being able to really master our sensations and our stress physiology. And this stems back to, when we were young. Were we allowed to feel something when we got hurt? My classic example, you fall off the bike. Did your parents let you cry?
Yeah.
And, snot come out of your nose and red in the face? Or were you immediately picked up and told everything was fine?
I was watching one of your earlier, actually, I think you posted it today, one of your IG videos, which if you don't follow Irene on social media, that alone is an education in itself, because you're very generous with what you put out there. But you were talking about how, when children come into the world, they don't have a capacity to regulate.
No. Nothing.
And so how do they
all.
learn how to regulate? They co-regulate. They learn through their parents. They learn through the people they're spending time with.
Yeah.
And I know we've touched on this in other podcasts, but if we're spending a lot of time, especially in our early development years, with people who don't have regulated nervous systems,
we learn that.
Right. We learn it. And we actually don't learn how to regulate our nervous system. And so this is where this education, yes, it might seem wild and frustrating that you're coming at it at 40, 50, 60 years old.
80.
But regardless of the age, what a blessing to everyone around you, because I would imagine on some level, we're always co-regulating. Does that ever really end? Where we're kind of absorbing the energy around us or learning from the people that we spend time with?
No. And I think what can change is our ability to do it with more sophistication. Yeah. Because it can also transfer to not so good, which would be severe codependence and not being able to be alone.
Sure.
So there's kind of this, introvert extrovert debate that's always going on. And for me, from what I've learned and seen in my students and over the years, is we're all built to have all of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're built to be able to be quiet and introspective and create and read and enjoy our own company and our own biology. And we're also built to, I've been to acting classes and really fun things where you watch humans when they're given an opportunity to express.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, my God, there is so much, freaking creativity and potential in each person. And everyone has the capacity to be wild and funny and extroverted, but also the opposite, because, if you have a newborn baby, you're not going to, well, we would hope you're not going to be a weird comedian to them. But of course, some people do that to just sort of ease a situation. But then you want to be quiet and gentle and calm, just like if you were to come across a dog on the street that's hurt. It's funny how a lot of humans, when they see animals, I think it's just a little simpler. We know how to treat, well, hopefully most people do, treat animals well. There's just something simpler with it. But no, the co-regulation thing is really interesting, because one of the things we get asked, Courtney, is I know that I had bad co-regulation growing up. Like, okay, I'm learning that. Mom wasn't there, dad wasn't there. They had their own troubles. They hated each other. And so I felt their tension, whatever it might be. And then there's this thought that to heal, you have to be in relationship.
Yeah.
I actually got this question a little while ago. And I said, well, or I would say, not necessarily. We do want to work towards having some forms of relationship, because humans are meant to be in connection. But if our primary relationships were terrifying, it's not going to make sense to go to a retreat and sit with a stranger and stare into their eyes.
Right.
How many times have you done that at these retreats? It's like, what am I doing here? I don't want to even close my eyes in this room. And, no. Yeah. And so part of the relearning, or maybe learning for the first time how to regulate yourself, is learning how to co-regulate with maybe things that aren't people.
Yeah. Nature.
And I have a very hot cup of tea here that I'm not even going to dare touch because it's so hot. Mm-hmm. But this could be a resource. Mm-hmm. And even just the act of feeling these resources that we have in our world, it could be a pet, but it could be a cup of tea, it could be a blanket. There's a reason why kids love their blankies.
Yeah.
And their teddies. Yeah. It's like it's teaching them to co-regulate on their own without mom and dad. But it's teaching them how to self-regulate. And so, as odd as it might sound for an adult to get themselves a teddy, but there's been students who in the forums, they'll be like, I was never allowed to have a doll, or we didn't have the money. Yeah. Or my blankie got burned by my brother, and my mother said, well, serves you right for leaving it in his room, whatever, right? I'm making that up. And then they realize, wow, I can go out and buy myself my own. And then they do. And it's just like so therapeutic. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we can also use that environment, like those things around us that aren't people, in a way that further dysregulates the nervous system. Like if we're always turning to food, or we're always turning to whatever the thing is that we're trying to distract our inner world from, right? We don't want to deal with our inner world. So we look into the outer world. That can be problematic too. So I see this like pathway with your work. And at least this was kind of my experience. Yeah. A lot of people can relate to this, where it's, first you kind of have this feeling that, well, this is just who I am. In fact, people say it all the time. I have clients say that to me constantly. This is just the way I am. It's just who I am. And I think, well, who you are is just a culmination of your practices.
Experiences.
Yeah. So this is where that neuroplasticity piece comes in, right? And people start realizing, I think too, they say that enough times, but they're also beating their head against that brick wall, right? So many times. And I don't know why some people need to suffer more than others, but hopefully everyone gets to a place where they're like, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah.
The way that I'm moving through my life is not working. I don't feel well. I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel peace. Mm-hmm. And so then we kind of get into the space of curiosity, like, okay, well, what am I missing? Right. And so we start trying things on like this, like your 3-part video series. Just like, oh, what is this about really? Yeah. And the curiosity starts to lead us into awareness. We start to try some things on, and we start to have some different experiences. And we start to also identify that being honest with ourselves is not as terrifying as we made it out to be.
Yeah.
And then with that awareness, and those practices, we start building all that capacity, which I love. And I don't remember where you said this, but somewhere you said that, building capacity to be aware and building your capacity to feel and your capacity to experience all of life is opening up energy for the things that we really want to be spending our time on.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a resource saver.
100%. And what so many people, to go back to that idea that so many people are living in survival.
Yeah.
If anything, watch video number 1 from that series, because I talk about the swimming pools and the beach balls. It's my classic analogy. But if someone's pool, i.e. their body, is filled with past stress and trapped everything, experiences, emotions, anger, blah, 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 there's no room for anything else. That's why when you sit down to do something that you have to do, you go blank. Yeah. Your system's going into a bit of a shutdown response. It just can't. Yeah. And this is even the case for people that, might be considered ADD or children, and they just can't focus, or they can't. It sounds like they're not trying to be difficult. They're not trying to not focus. They physically, biologically can't.
And don't you see that everywhere now? Like a number of people talking about ADHD and the fact that they can't, it's an epidemic.
It's a very huge epidemic. And I think what is getting missed, but it's starting to be talked about more. Again, biology drives the behavior. So if our biology is under intense duress, scanning for danger, feeling overwhelmed, or maybe not feeling anything, because when we can't feel, we can't really live and create. Now, of course, there's many artists that are completely dysregulated and produce amazing music and art, but often those people don't survive and last very long. Think about some of the great comedians and people that have left the planet, actors and musicians, because they're just so drowning in their survival physiology and they need out. Yeah. This is why a lot of suicide occurs, right? It's again, not good, but they really don't know what else to do. And I believe that they don't know what else to do. Yeah. And it's terrifying and it's really unfortunate. But the ADD thing, just as an aside, it is a sense of not being able to focus, but more than that, not being able to land. It is a deficit of attention, but it's also excess of hypervigilance. And so a lot of kiddos that are in that are terrified for some reason. And it might be because of a home life that's not good, but it also might be that they have never been given a chance to be who they are. And so when you mentioned your clients just think, this is how I am, this is how I am, it's like, well, this is how you are now, and this is how you are living in the current construct of your world. But if we were to go back to inception, and the moment that you started to bake in your mom's womb, how much stress was she under where you can just chill and replicate and grow with goodness? What was she feeding you? Was she terrified? Was she worried? All that gets into us. And then when we come out as infants, are we listened to when we need help, when we're hungry, when we're, are we left to cry ourselves to sleep, which I know you know about is not what we want to do with babies because they do not know how to self-regulate. And then it goes on, if we could never be our crazy human silly selves, we start to create layers and armor.
Yeah. Armor.
But it's psychic, but it's also physiologic.
Yeah.
We like these tissues in our body, which of course we learn and work with in SBSM, they start to become rigid, literally.
Yeah.
And if I was in fitness for 15 years before I got into this, like muscles are not meant to be tight and hard and not pliable. Yeah. Like they're meant to be like the way you would feel your dog or your cat, where you can like bend them in half, you know, and yet when they're running and moving, they're strong. And then when they're relaxed, they're relaxed.
Yeah.
You know, you have a pup, he never has trouble falling asleep.
Oh my gosh, no. And like all the stretching he does in the day, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, we should just learn from this creature. I am constantly learning from him.
Yeah.
But I, you know, something you said there just about it's you're building, like this builds over years, right? It's like layer upon layer of the rigidity and the fear and all the things.
Yeah.
And I think because of the population I work with, which is largely midlife, right? I always call it the renovation years, like between like 40 and 65, where women start looking around and they're like, you know, there's
a remodel.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. There's parts of their life they absolutely are in love with. And there are parts of their life where they're like, you know, we need some renovation here. And this is, I know that this is why I'm constantly referring people to your work as a tool, because it's such a powerful, literal renovation tool. I mean, that's what neuroplasticity is. You're renovating your brain.
You're renovating everything. And I think, you know, one of the things I hear from our older students, like in their 80s and 70s and 60s, is the grief that they have to process when they realize they didn't raise their children with this lens, and they know that they screwed them up and they're seeing the repercussions of that. They grieve the fact that they stayed in a marriage that they know they should have probably left, but because you weren't allowed to leave due to religion or just stoicism, you stayed. Career, why didn't I start to take care of my health? Why didn't I build the muscle? Now I've got this, you know, I have spinal osteoporosis, all these things. Like I hear it, and and we can still change at any age. I think that is the one thing we know for sure. There are so many amazing stories that I follow online of many older folk, like elderly, who are transforming their bodies. And it shows you how plastic we are. And the nervous system is a trickier beast. It isn't as simple as doing a weight training routine. And for some people that isn't simple, but trust me, that is simple compared to figuring out how to restore regulation to an autonomic nervous system that never got it. The good news is it totally can happen.
And this goes beautifully back to what you said earlier about those kind of two circles you were talking about that encompass the 5 elements that, you know, in your larger program, which is Smart Body, Smart Mind, which I can't recommend enough. It's brilliant. You're really teaching people the process of neuroplasticity in a way that they, number one, can learn, and they're not actually creating more trauma because they're choosing a strategy that kind of throws it all at them at once. Like you really piece it together in such a beautiful and progressive way. And then the second piece is that you create the space of safety. Like you're constantly reminding students of going at their own pace. You know, going back, like, because we all know, like, this is not one and done work. This is like revisit, keep practicing for the rest of your life. But also dosage, right? Everyone's going to feel like they have a different capacity for certain exercises. And I just think it's so brilliant and wonderful that you hold the space for that inside the course. So anyone who's listening, who's just like, oh, this feels hard. This feels terrifying.
It can be. I mean, I'll be really honest. We're working on stuff that was too painful for us to 100%. Work with, and too painful for our parents to work with. So I say that with full transparency. This is not just like eating a piece of apple pie. Like I was going to say, go ahead. And it's revolutionary, right? When we decide, and I will say one thing, Courtney, about the pacing. We really do. We like knock that out, and I'll just say it. There will be people that will still mow their lawn.
Of course. Right.
To use that metaphor, and it's like, what are you doing? We said, don't mow the lawn. And they're pushing. They're like, I got to get through the coursework for this. It's like, stop.
That's not what it's about. Yeah.
And I know that's hard because you've invested and you want to be in the session live.
Yeah.
And so a person also has to be okay with a little bit of uncomfortableness.
Yes.
But it's even in that, being honest with ourselves and actually saying, I can only do 5 minutes of this right now.
For sure.
That is better than pushing through something that's 30 minutes and then being more dissociated or more activated at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I just had to put that in there because it's super important.
No, I love it. And I think the other piece that it's so powerful is that we always feel braver in community, right? Like we feel supported. We feel like we're listening to the stories of other people where it's like, oh, I'm not the only person in the world who's ever experienced this. So normalizing the conversation of nervous system dysregulation, I think, is a big part of healing it. Is being in communities where we can have those conversations, and you've created all of that. So so I just basically want to tell listeners that there's really two opportunities here. Number one, if you just want to like dip your toe into the work and just start learning about the things that we're talking about, definitely register for the Healing Trauma video series, which is 3 parts. And you can register for that by going to graceandgrit.com/trauma. And then if you are someone who you've listened to every episode I've done with Irene, you've listened to all the interviews we've done in all the spaces and places, maybe you've done her 21-day tune-up and you just know you're ready for a deeper dive, I would say, make now the time to check out the larger program of Smart Body, Smart Mind, because it will change your life. It will change every facet of your life. And like you said, it's something that you will look at as a skill set that you probably wished you had learned in high school or college or in your in your early 20s, because it would have changed so many things in your world. And I'm not saying that to feed the regret or grief or any of that, but just as the invitation, it's like, stop waiting. We tend to wait and push things off so much. And I know everyone has a lot on their plate, but your whole life rides on your nervous system. Literally. And the element to add to that is, again, we hear this a lot. I want to wait until I have more time. I want to wait until I have more capacity. Yeah. And there are some instances where I will say to someone, okay, it might not be the time. And that might be if you are living in an absolute war zone. And by that I mean literal, like bombs are going off. Or you're in a very, very, things are an environment that is so toxic that there's no safety. There's nowhere that you can even go to listen and learn. So I'll say that, but I'll also say we have had students who have been doing this when they've been homeless. Yeah. Living out of their cars. Yeah. And also, Irene, I think a lot of people are living in a psychological war zone right now. Like they're living in a self-created war zone. And that is, I so strongly believe, what this work will help get people out of. And it's,
100%. And I will say that those that have already moved through this work have said to us, myself, our team, that if it wasn't for Smart Body, Smart Mind that they did 3 years ago or 4 years ago, or even last year, they would be in a very dark place right now as a result of the last 2 years. And so I mean, at the end of the day, we live in an ever-changing, unpredictable world. We do not know what is going to happen.
Uncertainty is life.
It's uncertainty. And you could fear that and dread that. And that, it's a little unsettling. However, when our trauma is unresolved, when we have survival stress in us, we will not be able to work with that uncertainty intelligently.
Right.
And so what I've seen in the last 2 years is those that thrive are aware of of the stuff. I'll just say the stuff and the stress, but they're not being sucked into it. Mm-hmm. But it's the same as if there's a drama in your family system, or there's an accident on the side of the road and you start staring at it so much that you get in your own accident. We know that happens. Yeah. Right. And so it really, it's a way to focus on yourself, because at the end of the day, if your system is not well and regulated, what are we going to do? It teaches us to know how to do the right thing, no matter what occurs, whether it's good stuff or not so good stuff.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I always ask myself too is what is the energy I'm bringing into the world, right? Because sometimes we can kid ourselves that, yes, I show up to work every day and I work with my clients and I have my child and I'm parenting in the best I can. But the best I can is only based on the best of the work that I'm doing on myself. Yeah. Right. And so when I have these tools and these skill sets, it just allows me to show up in all those spaces and places in a way that I feel really good about. Yeah. I feel really good about. So
Yeah.
if anyone listening is interested in the 12-week program, again, Smart Body, Smart Mind, you can go to graceandgrit.com/Smart Body, Smart Mind, and you can find out all the details through that link. You're amazing. I adore you. I can talk to you every week. Maybe we just need to start like the Irene and Courtney show.
Do that. Well, maybe when we do the next round, if you have your students that want to come and share and talk, or if you want to share and talk, if you move through some more of the material this season,
that would
talk about it.
Because I do. Irene Lyon's name comes up a lot in my. It's so funny, at least once a week, if not more often. But it's really great. I appreciate who you're being in the world. I so appreciate your work.
Thank you, my friend.
Yes. And I will be seeing you again soon, I hope.
Yes. Keep doing your stuff. Thanks for watching and listening, everyone. So hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.